World Water Day here in New York and around the world, and of course a very key landmark UN Water Conference. Leading South Africa's delegation is South Africa's Minister of Water and Sanitation, Senzo Mchunu, who you correctly point out is my guest here in the bowels of the United Nations. Minister, a warm welcome to the United Nations. I know it's your first time, and welcome back to SABC News.
Thank you very much to you and the listeners, and to everybody who is supporting you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
And supporting you, Minister. At the core of the UN Water Conference is Goal 6 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is focused on clean water and sanitation. Targets include achieving universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water, achieving adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all, and to end open defecation, improving the quality of potable water, and so on. What is your assessment of South Africa's progress, particularly as it relates to the targets I've just mentioned?
Well, I think generally South Africa has made a lot of progress on the overall goal 6, and on the targets, and also following criteria or the measurements or the key performance areas, all 11 of them. But doing so, there are gaps, and doing so does not mean that you have then therefore been able to reach every household in terms of water, every village, and so be it in terms of quality. There are still gaps, but in terms of progress, you look at 1994, it was almost unheard of that there would be piped water in a particular village beyond some townships in the country. And those townships have since expanded, those rural areas have since expanded, and quite a number of them have been supplied with water, and it's quite remarkable. But of course, if you ask me, would we have made much more progress than where we are at the moment? I would say yes. I would say yes, we could have made more progress, but at the same time, we must accept that we are here and there are challenges. And fortunately for us, the United Nations has been very organized and very willing to get countries to cooperate, get governments to cooperate, and work out goals like Goal 6, and work out even more details to say, if you follow this path, you will succeed as a nation on this particular aspect. And this is what is happening. And I must say, working within the framework of the SGDs is very helpful, because it gives a sense of direction, it gives a sense of what you need to achieve, and it is in line with what the people back home, for instance, and other countries require and need. And
also conferences of this nature allow you to then engage with your fellow government ministers, with civil society, the business sector, about best practices in terms of this very broad UN development agenda, not so?
Well, we're able to talk when we meet in the passages and when we meet in panels like I did with my counterpart in Palestine. We exchanged a few notes and willingness to talk further. I've just been with the Minister of Finland. We're able to network and talk about good practices, as you say, and then in the course of conversation, you then realize that we're better than those. And then they also realize we're better than them in this aspect.
So in your first answer, you mentioned two issues, the issue of universality and the issue of quality. One of the major challenges, Minister, for many countries, including South Africa, is climate change, and droughts in particular, unpredictable rainfall that lead to water shortages. We see those impacts around the country, particularly in places like Gqeberha today. Yes. But then you have the other side of the coin, Minister, which is the poor state of municipal infrastructure. Yes. Lack of maintenance and investment that leads to water losses and pollution, poor planning where demand exceeds supply, particularly in some of the urban areas in Gauteng today, begging the question, is South Africa's water supply becoming a problem akin to what we are seeing in other sectors of South Africa's economy, most notably Eskom and power generation today?
Yes, all the areas that you are counting, climate change, managed water management, infrastructure, are a problem. You recall, on the 18th and 19th of Feb last year, we convened a two-day summit nationally, and this was following our visit to all provinces in the country, all 9 of them, where we spent 3 days in each province with water services authorities, just to make an assessment in terms of where they are and where they want to go and where they need to go and so on. And we realized, they pointed out in no uncertain terms, Minister, we have a problem of capacity, meaning money, skills, people who work in water.
Hydrologists, economists,
yes.
resource economists, yeah.
And therefore it talks to the quality of work that each municipality can or cannot do. And I found that more than 90% of them have this problem of capacity, have this problem of old infrastructure, right. Be it your waterworks plant, your wastewater treatment plant, your pipes and so on. And indeed, our green drop assessment, which we resuscitated after a 3 or so year ELR, does indicate to us the results or the assessment in each municipality, how their wastewater is managed or not managed. And this year we're going to be releasing the blue drop, which will tell us the quality of water in the whole country per municipality. And these are all the things that point and give you the direction of where you need to go.
UNISA professors Richard Meisner and Anya Duplessis wrote in September last year that the state of the country's wastewater treatment and water treatment works are a major concern, with around 50% in poor or critical condition, with 11% not functioning at all,
yes.
With regular water quality monitoring and water infrastructure assessments not done consistently. How do you remedy a situation like this, Minister, given your purview?
Let me just give you what we've just started with Gauteng. Gauteng is serviced by Rand Water, which is our water board. And there are 3 big metros, and there are other water service authorities. Now, we started by meeting Rand Water alone to say, what's happening? There's a shortage of water in Gauteng. But yes, we know there are leaks, we know there are informal settlements and so on. But the effect of the matter is that there's shortage. And then we met metros, all of them, all these water service authorities. They gave us their perspective and so on, and we put them together. We didn't get satisfactory answers until the 13th of March this year, where we now came and said, having listened to all of you and having assessed every other aspect of provision of water in Gauteng in terms of water services. Now, this is the reality of the matter that is facing all of us, not you and you alone, not you and us alone, but all of us as a collective. I have really come to understand the need for working together, like I did on the 13th of March. It has been just a word, let's work together, let's work. But on the 13th, that transformed into practice. We need to work together in practice with those municipalities. Of course, we are leading the water sector in South Africa, and we have to exercise that leadership. And we came to realize that part of what we have to exercise leadership on is to make people understand that they have to overcome their weaknesses, their subjectivity, and forget about hiding information and volunteer this on the part of municipalities. In that way, you put all of us in a situation where we understand everything, the situation as it is, and then work together to improve that. And that is what has happened in Gauteng, and I'm very happy with it, because we now know, all of us, what we need to do. And on infrastructure in particular, we are now moving to an area where each of those municipalities commit that in the next 2 years, this is the amount on infrastructure alone. This is the amount on infrastructure. And Rand Water says so. We say so as well. And we've got, by 2028, there's no doubt, we will have changed the situation, but we are going elsewhere as well.
I've seen, Minister, I've seen some of these timelines. You mentioned 2028, right? There is
and 2 years.
Great focus. 2028 is not 2 years.
Yeah,
That's
no.
I'm
I'm also counting 2 years because we're saying, what are you going to do in 2 years?
Right.
But then, in longer term,
here's my problem with putting a date on it, right?
Yes.
Government is notorious for missing deadlines. I mean, just ask the people at Eskom and bringing those coal-powered powered stations online. There's a 25 billion rand Mzimvubu water project in the Eastern Cape, delayed. Building of a major pipeline from the Gerrit Dam to augment water supply in Mangaung. Raising the dam at Hazelmere to ensure long-term water supply to eThekwini. A 24 billion rand Olifants River water resource development project to fast-track supplies to Limpopo. Billions being thrown at the problem, particularly the focus on infrastructure. The concern, is that money going to be spent correctly, and are you going to meet the deadlines? What's your role in ensuring that both those happen?
These problems, delays, and sometimes lapses, total lapses. A project gets abandoned after it started or after it had been planned for.
That's called fruitless and wasteful expenditure, right?
Yeah, no, even before you spend. Who does this? It's men and women. In other words, these problems are man-made. They are woman-made. They don't come from God, and they're not as a result of some strange occasion. Now, what have we said? When we started on the 5th of August, after the appointment by the President, we said, look, you can't do anything unless you have capacity yourself and strength and depth in terms of capacity to do the job. And then we started filling up the posts, Director General, 4 or 5 Director Generals, Deputy Director Generals, more than 21 Chief Directors, all of them with specialized skills. And we made it a point that we will get particular people, not just everybody. And now those posts are filled and people are at work. And we have said, part of what you have to do, definitely, under our leadership, is make sure we come the whole of South Africa on projects, and we're still doing so, that have lapsed, that were promised in 2013, 2014, 2015.
That's right.
And we have data now, and we're working on that. It is history that you are still going to see things like a lapse in Mzimvubu, lapse in Hazelmere. In fact, Hazelmere we're commissioning now in March, end of March. You come to South Africa, you phone them. You will hear me commissioning that. Mzimvubu, we are starting because we reviewed the packaging. It was wrong.
Yeah.
It was too much, and it was exaggerated in terms of the packaging.
And the problem with these delays is that you have a deadline called the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, where certain benchmarks have to be met, and from the national government down to local government.
We dare not damage the integrity of South Africa on this matter and underperform. And therefore, part of what we have to do is to ensure that the integrity of South Africa is untainted when it comes to SDGs. And I'm there to ensure.
It's called consequence management, is it not?
It is. It is. I mean, you first have, there is a graph that shows which one of the targets are you meeting and how and so on, which one you are missing. It's there. Data is fed into the data of the United Nations on a regular basis. 2023, the next one is coming 2026 or something like that. All you need to do is to stay awake, to be alert, and to focus and to make sure you perform as expected. And this is what we're trying to do now. That's why we revived green drop, blue drop, and so on, because those are your pointers on how you are performing, as opposed to just removing all the pointers and then you just perform.
Minister, there is a bill before Parliament that relates to the creation of a water resource infrastructure agency. I think President Ramaphosa mentioned this in his previous State of the Nation, that will be responsible for designing and planning, financing, development, and the operations of national water resource infrastructure.
Yes.
When do you expect this agency to be in place?
Well, the agency is going to take a little bit of time because of the government processes. That bill is now in consultation. It has got to go to cabinet. As soon as it passes there, it goes to the National Assembly for processing.
But there's real urgency here, right?
It's an agency, yes.
I'm saying, but there's urgency for this agency.
There's urgency because the water sector general in South Africa, and I'm sure elsewhere, is expected to generate its own income and its own survival tactics. It's not wholly funded by government, and therefore part of the objective is to get to a level where you fund your infrastructure on water and sanitation, but in a self-sustainable way. That's where we're going. But it doesn't mean that there's no. Remember, the agency will take from where we will build it around TCTA, which is already there. It's the one that is delivering on phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands.
Yeah.
Yes, so it's something that is living already. We just have to complete that process. But work is continuing via TCTA and via our own infrastructure internally. We've got an internal company that is doing work. So it's not like we're waiting per se.
Minister, on the issue of sanitation, community organization Equal Education said earlier this month that over 5,000 schools in South Africa still had pit toilets a decade after the Department of Education adopted the minimum uniform norms and standards for public school infrastructure, which is essentially there to ban pit toilets at schools.
Yes.
This comes after the body of a 3-year-old child was found in a pit toilet at Glen Primary School in the Eastern Cape earlier in March. I recognize this is the purview of the Department of Basic Education, but let me put it to you. I want your view on this. Why does it, what does it say, Minister, about South Africa, where a child can, in 2023, still die by falling into a pit toilet?
No, it's indeed a sad occasion or a sad incident that could have been prevented. I just want to be upfront with you there. It requires the Department of Education to refocus, and perhaps we also need to get into much more tighter cooperation with them, such that when we deal with bulk water, when we do reticulation, which we are doing in a much more faster pace at the moment, because we are intervening in municipalities. We don't leave schools out. We don't leave clinics out. We don't leave hospitals out. And that is the way to do it, because by nature, even if there were to be no child getting into this particular tragedy or affected by this tragedy, pit toilets by name are unhealthy.
Absolutely. The name speaks for itself.
The name speaks for itself and its history and so on. And the kind of people who are exposed and communities who are exposed to that. And in terms of the urban rural setup, the kind of people who are exposed to this kind of thing. So it just needs to be urgently done away with.
You mentioned there, Minister, in that response, we have to intervene in municipalities. How big of a problem is this on the national department, this intervention in municipalities where you have this dearth of skills, you have failing municipalities that are not meeting their audit obligations and just not implementing the strategies that perhaps come down from you? This is a huge problem, is it not?
We are intervening in a pace that is far more envisaged by Section 63 and 139, because those are provisions in the legislative framework which require certain processes to follow.
Extraordinary processes.
Now we no longer follow that. We just identify a problem.
Okay.
We then interact openly with various authorities, including provinces and municipalities and SALGA, and then we get to work. Because if we were to be following legislation, I'm telling you, we wouldn't be where we are now. We are all over the country, but fortunately, our interventions are very cooperative in terms of nature. we don't come as a big brother and say we're taking over water. We don't. We come and say, here is the report of your problems. Give us your report on water and sanitation, because if you don't give us a report, and if we don't turn the situation around, you are putting us under the bus. There's no Minister of Water and Sanitation who will sit in Pretoria when people in an area outside Pretoria somewhere is saying, we don't have water. And then you say, talk to your mayor. We don't adopt that attitude. We are doing it ourselves, and we are there all over.
So we've talked a lot about the role of the national government, the responsibilities of municipalities at the local level, but what's the role of the private sector here, Minister, and the need for more public-private partnerships, as is the case, as we've seen demonstrated by companies like Coca-Cola South Africa. There's a project, Lungisa in Grabouw, in partnership with the Waterskloof municipality, where they are literally training community members in plumbing, how to manage the infrastructure, the pipes and that kind of stuff. Is this an example for other companies to follow?
It's a very good example to follow. And we're actually, and I want to take this opportunity and say to business, to private sector, look, this thing that the public sector is not trustworthy, that we are affected by corruption, is difficult to cooperate with us. Let's put that aside. We're in a new era. One, we've a partnership office ourselves with DPSA, so that business cooperate with us as the public sector via that partnership office, and that is corruption proof. And two, there are also companies that are even coming to us outside the partnership office. Let me make an example. We have I think is the biggest partnership that we signed on the 27th of October last year with Libalelo, which is a group of, under which there's a group of 13, 14, 15 mining houses in Limpopo, in terms of which they will put, they've committed 12 billion rand, and we have also committed 12 billion rand to make it 24. And this is going to be a two-wing, the eastern wing and the left wing and the western wing. In the eastern wing of Limpopo, from the dam right up to Polokwane, we are going to be covering 13 villages. This side we're covering 96 villages, together with mining houses, of course, in those areas. So in the next 5 years, this is opening. We're running already the first project in the form of a pump station somewhere in one of the towns on the way to Limpopo.
A couple more questions before we let you go. We've talked here about the skills deficit in South Africa, right? We need engineers, scientists, hydrologists, resource economists, and so forth. What's your department doing to ensure that that's coming through the chain?
Firstly, let me acknowledge that there is that problem. You go to a municipality, you ask them how big or how small is your workforce. They will tell you we're 400, and you ask how many people have degrees on civil engineering, for instance. In some cases, you'll find one. In some cases, nobody.
Wow.
And I'm telling you, nobody. And all these people are there, but none of them are skilled. And they are expected to send water uphill, and so you can't. Water supply to households doesn't run like a river, just one way, and so on, gravitating. It has to be sent this. So you need education. That's number one. What is our department doing? We have a training academy in terms of which we're producing skills of our own. I met 3 youngsters. One of them had, I think 3 days ago, the competition, and we were very proud of Ayanda in terms of how she performed. But in essence, in the main, what is it that we're doing? We have water ports. Now, these water ports have been reconfigured. We are finishing reconfiguration by end of April. Now, they are better positioned in terms of skills themselves, so that they intervene in municipalities, and we are doing this more and more because they are better skilled, because this is what is necessary. Just to measure the pipe and the population and so on, you don't mismatch. You actually do things accordingly. But the last thing, which is super and very sweet, I'm just from the other room. I've signed an agreement with my counterpart in Finland. It's a brand new memorandum of understanding in which this is dominated by skills exchange, knowledge exchange, and they are going to be doing lots and lots of training of South Africans on various aspects of water. And there are others, of course, with other countries, both in Africa and Europe and other continents. And there, we're really focused, and we want to up our game in skilling.
I'm glad, Minister, you said
Yes.
super and sweet, because this is how I want to end, right?
Yes.
What does success look like at a conference like this? Implementation on targets on SDG 6 are failing, as are all the other targets on all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which has implications for meeting the agreed deadline of 2030. So my question is, what must this conference deliver, in your view?
This conference must deliver, in the main, fire inside authorities at a country level, at a municipal level, the public sector, the private sector. If it can deliver fire so that all of us feel this burn of turning things around, 2030 is around the corner. We mustn't shift the deadlines. We must shift the way we are doing things. That create a perception that we are relaxed and so on, and we don't have a target, and get into grips with the work that we have to do. And I think we're getting there. By the third day, there should be fire in the assembly that will make us speak one language and assist on it, including on financing, because that's one generator. We need this. We need money. I mean, that will generate energy.
Across all the
this.
SDGs,
Yes.
you need financing. Minister, fire at a water conference. I didn't think I'd hear it. Thank you very much.
I'm at fire. Thank you so
very much. And may the fire continue in your belly. Peter, the Minister, Senzo Mchunu, South Africa's Water and Sanitation Minister, here, speaking to us on the sidelines of the UN Water Conference on World Water Day. And don't mistake this blue tie for fire. It's supposed to represent water, Peter.